standing for Jesus, standing in the gap for family and friends, standing in the gap, one love for all, so we all can make it in. Standing in the gap, standing for Jesus, standing in the gap for family and friends, standing in the gap, one love for all, so we all can make it in. Studying to show ourselves approved, rightly dividing the word of truth, increasing our faith to envision our freedom, so we all can glorify our God.
Christ gave us that the commission, the to spread the gospel through all the highways and byways to the ends of the earth and all that. And we're not spreading the gospel back in 2000 when Christ walked the earth, or even before then, 2,000 years ago. But we have to spread it today. In order to know where to spread it and what to spread in the gospel, we have to know what's going on in the world today, meaning the current events. And so we dedicated a portion of our ministry to keep you updated on current events. And I tell you the truth, there's so much going on in this world. And so, I said, look, I'm going to let Marvel handle this. And so she's been handling this part of the ministry, and there's so much for her to choose from. She's chosen, and I think she even changed course through the middle of the week for the things that have been happening. But we're going to turn it over to her right now for what we call the Gap News.
Well, saints, Lord have mercy. I had a whole Gap News teed up to go for today because we had a plane crash, the first plane crash in almost 20 years in America. And then the president and the secretary of transportation and the secretary of defense got up on the podium and tried to blame the whole plane crash on DEI. That's what they did. And I had a whole thing done for it, ready to go with the Gap News. And then last night, we had a purge. So last Friday night, Trump fired 18 inspectors general illegally, without giving notice to the Congress, without saying why he was firing them. And it seemed like nobody said anything hardly about it. Well, last night, let me show you what happened. The purge.
So the difference is this. When you hear the term Saturday Night Massacre, that is about Nixon, right? President Nixon was under investigation by the Justice Department. On a Saturday night in 1973, he decided, screw it, I will no longer stand for that. And so on a Saturday night in 1973, Nixon ordered the Attorney General to fire the prosecutor that was leading the investigation into Nixon. The Attorney General said no, and he resigned. Then Nixon ordered the Deputy Attorney General to fire the prosecutor leading the investigation. He too said no and resigned. Then Nixon ordered the number 3 official at the Justice Department to fire the prosecutor leading the investigation into him. And finally, he did it. And that was the Saturday Night Massacre. That was President Nixon's way of trying to stop an ongoing investigation of himself, which he both hated and feared. That is the Saturday Night Massacre. It is a very famous thing in American politics and law. But the Saturday Night Massacre, importantly, did not work. I mean, on that Saturday night, he was able to chop his way through the Justice Department until he was able to successfully that night fire the prosecutor. But it was a very short-lived victory. Only 10 days later, Congress opened proceedings to impeach him. 2 days after that, Justice Department just appointed another special prosecutor to replace the one that Nixon had gotten fired. So that investigation proceeded. We all know how it ended. That was the Saturday Night Massacre. It was a dramatic and unsuccessful effort, one that was ultimately ruled to be illegal. But the point of what Nixon did there was that he was trying to stop an investigation that was actively underway. And that has gone down as one of the most ignominious actions by a U.S. president in American history. But that is not what is happening tonight in Washington, D.C. Tonight, what they are trying to do in Washington, D.C. and at the U.S. Justice Department and at the FBI is something that I think inarguably is worse than that. Because what they are trying to do tonight is not trying to stop an active investigation. Tonight, they are seeking revenge for law enforcement personnel who participated in a previous investigation that is now over. And the reason that is worse is because the point of what they are doing tonight is to permanently, irrevocably change law enforcement in the United States of America. To make it so FBI agents and prosecutors just won't, in the future, pursue criminal investigations and criminal cases if the suspected criminals in those cases are associated with the president and this movement that supports him. They are trying to not get rid of an investigation, they're trying to get rid of American law enforcement as we know it. They're trying to get rid of the very idea of an independent, justice-is-blind system that makes America who we are. This is not the Saturday Night Massacre. This is considerably worse, and it is hard to see how what happens tonight can be corrected, can be undone, the way the Saturday Night Massacre was undone within 12 days. This is a really serious thing. Now, before tonight, they had already fired prosecutors who had worked on the special counsel's investigation that brought charges against President Trump. The charges for the alleged hoarding and mishandling of classified documents, charges for illegally trying to overthrow the results of the 2020 presidential election. They already fired prosecutors involved with those investigations. What they are doing tonight is apparently attempting a mass purge of prosecutors who worked on all the other January 6th cases, the ones just involving rioters who attacked the Capitol building on Trump's behalf. Tonight, approximately 30 prosecutors who worked on January 6th rioter prosecutions have all been fired. We are going to be speaking with one of those prosecutors in just a moment. Beyond that, they appear to be in the midst of a mass purge at the FBI. At least a half dozen senior leaders of the FBI have already been told to resign or be fired on Monday. Beyond that senior leadership, though, they're also trying to remove just normal FBI line agents, potentially hundreds or even thousands of them. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, this is still an emerging story. Details may yet evolve as this story develops and we learn more. My best understanding of what has happened thus far is this, and if I stand corrected by the end of this hour, I will not be surprised. But this is what I understand to have happened just thus far. In an instruction that appears to have originated at the White House, Trump's hand-picked acting officials at the Justice Department directed FBI headquarters to hand over internal files from the Jack Smith cases, from the Trump classified documents case, from the Trump overthrow the election case. They were told, the FBI headquarters was told to hand over those files so a FBI line agents and FBI supervisors who were involved in those cases in any way. So personnel action could be taken against those FBI personnel. So they could be punished, removed, reassigned, or fired. The Washington Post reports tonight that FBI supervisors advised agents that any agents who worked on either of those two cases, the Jack Smith cases, FBI supervisors reportedly advised agents that they should be prepared for the Trump administration to release to the public the names of the FBI agents who worked on those cases before they would then be fired on Monday. So rather than just firing them, they were basically going to tell, Trump supporters, including those who were just let out of prison by Donald Trump, tell them, hey, here's the names of FBI agents who were part of all the January 6th investigations, the ones that targeted Trump. Don't worry, though, they're no longer agents. We're firing them today, so go ahead and have at them. Now, tonight, MSNBC's Ryan Riley has obtained a memo sent by the acting director of the FBI to all FBI personnel. And it would seem to indicate that even beyond those things that I have just described, beyond the prosecutors who did the 2 Trump cases, beyond FBI personnel at the senior levels of the FBI, beyond FBI personnel involved in the 2 Trump cases, what Ryan Riley has obtained tonight, this letter from the acting FBI director to all FBI personnel, would seem to indicate that they are planning a massive purge beyond that. Some kind of purge against not just the agents who participated in some way in the 2 Jack Smith cases, where Trump was charged. But beyond that, they appear to be targeting all the FBI agents who were involved in any of the cases brought against January 6th rioters. And to put this in perspective, the January 6th riot cases make up the largest single investigation ever in the history of the Bureau. The January 6th cases are the largest criminal caseload ever assembled by the Department of Justice. If they are going to try to purge every FBI agent who took any part in any one of these well over 1,000 cases, that's kind of the whole FBI. I mean, not every single member of the FBI, but certainly most of the FBI. Here's the memo obtained tonight by MSNBC's Ryan Riley. Quote, colleagues, we understand there's a lot of media reporting and rumors surrounding potential changes at the FBI. This includes reporting and rumors about actions that very seriously impact our workforce. Consistent with our commitment to share information with you as we receive it, Acting Deputy Director Kassane and I want to provide you with an update. Late this afternoon, I received a memo from the Acting Deputy Attorney General notifying me that 8 senior FBI executives are to be terminated by specific dates unless these employees have retired beforehand. So 8 of them will be out unless they quit. Quote, I have been personally in touch with each of these impacted employees. The memo also directs me to provide by noon on Tuesday the following. Quote, all current and former FBI personnel assigned at any time to investigations and or prosecutions relating to events that occurred at or near the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. And also, secondly, United States versus Haniyeh, which is, I believe, a case about Hamas and the October 7th attack. They want a list of all current and former FBI personnel assigned at any time to investigations or prosecutions related to January 6th or that one Hamas case. Quote, these lists should include relevant supervisory personnel in FBI regional offices and field divisions, as well as FBI headquarters. For each employee included in the list, provide the current title, office to which the person is assigned, role in the investigation or prosecution, and date of last activity relating to the investigation or prosecution. Upon timely receipt of the requested information, the Office of the Deputy Attorney General will commence a review process to determine whether additional personnel actions are necessary. The acting director of the FBI then tells personnel at the FBI, quote, we understand that this request encompasses thousands of FBI employees across the country who have supported these investigative efforts. I am one of those employees, as is Acting Deputy Director Kassane. As we have said since the moment we agreed to take on these roles, meaning the acting director and acting deputy director of the FBI, we are going to follow the law, follow FBI policy, and do what is in the best interest of the workforce and the American people always. We will be back in touch with more information as soon as we can. In the meantime, stay safe and take care of each other. Brian J. Driscoll, Jr., Acting Director. Again, this letter tonight to all FBI personnel, it is from Brian Driscoll, who is the somewhat accidental acting director of the FBI. He's a longtime employee of the FBI. He's apparently part of the hostage rescue team. The Trump administration tried to name him to be the number 2. They tried to name him to be the acting deputy director of the FBI. There was a whole different guy, Robert Kassane, New York counterterrorism official, who was supposed to be named acting director, but the Wall Street Journal reported yesterday that the Trump administration actually mixed up which guy was which. They meant to name Kassane to be director and Driscoll to be deputy, but they screwed up and accidentally named Driscoll the director and Kassane the deputy. Once those 2 guys realized that they'd been named for the wrong jobs, they just decided it would be easier to switch jobs and switch offices. So that's how we got Brian Driscoll as the acting director of the FBI tonight. As former Trump defense lawyer Emil Bove at the Justice Department, possibly on orders from the White House, has demanded a list of every single FBI agent in the entire country who worked on any January 6th case in any capacity at all. And even though that includes the new acting director and the new acting deputy director, who Trump himself just ham-handedly accidentally appointed, they say the reason they want that list is because they're going to review it for potential personnel action against all those agents. Again, that is thousands of FBI agents all across the country. And again, this is a developing story. This is as clear as I can be with you right now on the details of what has happened and what they seem to be trying to do. But also be clear on what this means, right? This is not an if situation. We are seeing it already with the firings they have already effectuated, with the threats they have already made. If law enforcement officials and agents have their careers threatened, which they have now all had their careers threatened, and indeed if they are fired, and they indeed are already starting to be fired, if they have their careers threatened and are fired because they took part in lawfully predicated criminal investigations, where grand juries handed down indictments, where judges signed search warrants, where juries returned convictions, if they nevertheless are fired for taking part in those lawful, proper criminal law enforcement actions because the president in power now doesn't like those cases, that is not Nixon. That is not a president trying to get out of an investigation he's scared of for himself. That is the end of independent law enforcement as a core value of who we are as a country, right? That's an end to the idea that law enforcement pursues justice without regard to favors and preferences dictated by the people in power. Here's how the New York Times puts it tonight, quote, if the administration follows through, it would be a singular moment in the FBI's history, and it would fly in the face of decades worth of civil service laws that are meant to protect the integrity and professionalism of federal law enforcement. And those are very pretty words and nice concepts, and that means they all blur together and seem just kind of like Americana. Let's be more blunt about it. If you lose those things, if you lose the independence and professionalism of federal law enforcement, what that means is we are rewiring the FBI and federal prosecutors so they will now, henceforth, only do arrests and searches and investigations and prosecutions that please the president, regardless of who it is that's committing crimes. These firings, which are now underway, are changing one of the fundamental things that makes us the kind of country that we are. This is very bad. Jamie Raskin, Democratic congressman and professor of constitutional law, told the Washington Post tonight this. He said, quote, if allowed to proceed, Trump's purge of our federal law enforcement workforce will expose America to authoritarianism and dictatorship. Joining us now is Carol Leonnig, Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post investigative reporter who is really, really well-sourced on justice matters and law enforcement. She's covering this story tonight. Carol, thanks for being here tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're in the midst of a lot of reporting.
Glad to be here, Rachel.
Let me ask you if I've said anything that strikes you as wrong or that's been overtaken by subsequent reporting since I started talking.
No, unfortunately, I think everything you've relayed is very factual. What we're seeing is a series of people who are being told they'll be terminated likely by Monday if they don't move along quickly. They are very much the senior cadre of leadership of the FBI, all of them career, not one political. And we are also seeing that thousands of agents are essentially on tenterhooks now after a series of memos, both a memo from the acting attorney general and an email from the acting FBI director telling them that files are being reviewed now, mostly at the White House's behest, to determine which agents who worked, which scores of agents worked on the January 6th investigation, a riot in which police officers died and were injured, 140 were injured, that those individuals may be reviewed for termination as well, and that.
Wow. Did y'all know that this happened last night? That's the first thing. That's the first thing. Now, Sister Monica did make a comment that I want to put up here. Isn't that illegal, honey?
Well, if you're talking about civil service people, they have rights to their position can be removed for cause and that type thing. So there should be some lawsuits that come out of that. To a certain extent, some of those appointments, if they're political appointments, then of course the president has a right to do whatever he wants to with them.
Sister Monica said, this really sounds like a radical dismembership of our government. I heard Rachel Maddow say, and I heard Carol Lennox say that none of these firings are political, that they're all career service people,
Civil service.
civil servants. And I was so smacked last night when I saw this. I literally just sat there and I just started thinking, if, just like Jamie Raskin said, if this is allowed to proceed, then what the Project 2025 book says is get rid of all of those people. We've got people already lined up to put into these positions. And what came to my mind, and maybe I was overreacting, but what we would have would be a Gestapo. What do you think, honey?
I think that be careful who you vote for. Also, I think, this is what they found out is that instead of doing all this evil stuff behind the curtain and all that so that people don't find out what you're doing, that it's better to just tell them what you're going to do and then go ahead and do it. And so that's what they're doing. And to a certain extent, that's something that we haven't seen. We always look at the criminals hiding stuff and all that, but they're doing it out in the open. And they told us, and they're coming through with it and all that kind of thing. It's a bad situation, of course. But it just shows one thing, is that who can we turn to in these times of trouble? Like Whitney says, I go to the rock.
I go to the rock. But we gotta go somewhere that's here on earth right now, too. I'm sorry. And I mean, I actually I woke up in my sleep and I was singing We Shall Overcome in my sleep last night.
Well,
this is not no mess, y'all. This is not a plaything. And I don't even know. I mean, so in Ohio, I have 2 Republican senators. I do have some Congress people in Ohio that are not Republican, but I feel like that I need to be writing to every representative that I can to protest and to ask them to do something. Because when they fired those inspectors general last week, crickets. Nobody said or did anything. Adam Schiff said this is illegal, and then they went on about their business. Nobody did anything. I was expecting to see a lawsuit this past week about that. There was nothing. And now here we have the whole top echelon of the FBI, not the political, not the one that's trying to get confirmed right now. These are career service civil servants, people who have knowledge, who have expertise, who have experience, who have made their vow, they made their oath to the Constitution. And they are being summarily removed without cause. So you say that somebody can do a lawsuit. Why didn't anybody from the Inspector General do it last week?
You have to ask them. The only thing I can tell you is that I'm not going to put my faith in Democrats, Republicans, senators, or congressmen, and all that, because as we've seen, they don't stand up and do anything. Okay? So we're in a situation right now. And like I said, as we're going to find out with this black church history that we're going through, is there come times when the only thing you can do is turn to the rock. And he's able. And if you're going to wait on those people to stand up and do the right thing, I mean, you almost lost there because apparently they don't do it.
Well, it's really interesting too. We're studying the black church now and talking about all things that they did back in our history. I feel like that now is the time for the black church to step up and organize and fight back.
And a lot of them are doing it. So we'll see. I mean, it's early in the process. It's actually not as early as people think, because they've been saying they're going to do this.
Oh, we talked about it all last summer. We talked about it.
And they're coming through on it. All right. Anything else?
No, I guess I'm the only one that's no, it's not true, because I heard the news cycles this morning. People are hair on fire. What are we going to do? What can we do? Because if this stands, we are headed into a dictatorship in short order. Hitler did it in, I think, 43 days or 45 days. Trump has been in office less than 14 days.
Now understand, this is the Bible is replete with situations where you have dictatorships and you have autocracies and all that kind of thing that have been forced upon God's people. And God has stood with them throughout that time, and all He asks for is your faith in Him. And so we definitely have to do that. That doesn't mean we sit by and let everything happen. We need to be empowered by that faith. So, thank you for the gap.
Lord have mercy.
All righty. Well, she didn't even have a chance to mention the second air crash that we had last night.
I'm telling you, it's I don't know what to say, what to think, and I'm not even going to come back on camera. 2 air crashes in the first 2 weeks of this administration. Why? Because on inauguration day, the FAA head was fired or forced out. I think they forced him to resign, and the deputy was forced to resign. So Trump was in his press conference after the first big crash that killed 67 souls, saying, well, I just hired somebody just right now. Lord have mercy.
All righty. Well, I think we've given Gap News an ample amount of time to get you all riled up. And we're going to move on to the study, the underlying study, which coincides with, if you look at and deeply into what we're teaching in these classes, you'll see how it goes right into what's happening in current events. As we look at the black church and we look at the history of the black church, and I always want to start out by saying, people say, why are we going so into the black church and all that kind of thing? Well, if you ask that question, then, there's a problem in that we tend to forget the importance of the black church if we have to ask, why are we talking about the black church? But it really got inspired by a video by Jimmy Swaggart's son. And some of you may know Jimmy Swaggart. He went down the tubes in his evangelism because he couldn't resist the wiles of a prostitute. And so, but his son is coming up in his wake, and he's a Pentecostal preacher, I guess, evangelical, And he found it necessary in this last presidential election to call out the black church, to send a preemptive strike to the black church, because the black church doesn't look at things the way he looks at things. And so, you know, he sent this out, and one of our followers, Michael Graves, indicated that, hey, we need to respond to this. So I looked at it and I said, okay, we have something here. So we're going to get into it.
Before that, I just want to share. Sister Elaine said, "I am with you, Marvel. We shall overcome. Maybe there is a plan being made. Maybe they are not standing by. He is being set up for the big letdown. God is. Everybody, God is."
All right. Well, let's simmer down a little bit.